Slaves and ivory, two commodities intertwined. Though slavery existed in Africa for centuries, it was not until the arrival of European expeditions into the continent that the enterprise greatly expanded. It quickly became a cheap way for Western nations to bring in droves of unpaid workers to cultivate the land, build infrastructure, and serve the ruling classes. The first slaves arrived in what is now Cuba in the early 1500s, procured by Spanish traders. As the need for labor rose, the slave population all throughout the modern world skyrocketed, and by the late 18th century, slaves were the most valuable commodity of them all, traveling to Europe, South, and North America through the transatlantic slave trade. As slaves continued to make their way to the West, the demand for more treasured resources continued to rise. One of these rare and coveted commodities was ivory. Known to African tribes for hundreds of years, ivory was used in art, commerce, and for military purposes. In the 1700s, the material was a favorite of the Sultan in India. However, it is the ivory that traveled to Europe that changed the commodity forever, as well as the ecological, social, and political landscape of Eastern and Central African nations. Ivory from the eastern and central parts of Africa was primarily made from elephant and hippopotamus tusks. Elaborate African carvings dated back to medieval times and depicted war scenes, ancient kings, and ancient queens. When demand for ivory in Europe reached a crescendo in the 1840s, it did so with the help of African slaves. Soon, hundreds of pounds of elephant tusks were being transported by slaves to Europe for the creation of piano keys, billiards, and cutlery handles. Trade for this luxury commodity took place in large markets, such as the ones found in Zanzibar, which also maintained its status as one of Africa's largest slave markets. Arab and Swahili traders would invade tribal camps, kidnap men and women in order to form large-scale elephant hunting parties. These victims would then be taken to market, along with the tusks for sale to other African traders and most notably European colonists. Ivory and slavery were both tightly connected to the advent of European colonialism and imperialism. At the height of foreign powers in Africa, thousands of elephants were slaughtered, damaging the ecosystem and the natives indefinitely. King Leopold I of Belgium was one such imperialist who exploited the land and its people in an attempt to gain a monopoly on the riches found in Central Africa. Leopold I appointed a Swahili prince as his governor and ordered him to use villagers for both ivory and slavery trading enterprises. His colony in the Congo Basin later became a brutal rubber-making enterprise when his son, Leopold II, took over in the late 1800s. However, it is the lasting devastation of Leopold I's extraction of ivory and people that harmed Central Africa's ability to govern after the fall of colonialism. As the 20th century began, ivory trade continued, but the immorality of slavery changed how labor was used in Africa and in the West. By the early 1900s, elephant populations in Central and Eastern Africa dwindled significantly, and a ban on ivory trading began. The importance of rubber in the international community also rose at this time, and the need to use the African continent for its resources of rubber vine sap took precedence. By the late 1900s, ivory hunting and trading had become illegal, though the effects of ivory trading still affect countries like the Congo to this day. In 1989, the elephant population was 600,000 strong, when just 10 years prior it was over 1 million. The illegal collection of ivory tusks resulted in the killing of over 85,000 elephants per year, totaling in $1 billion in profits for illegal traders. To combat poaching and save the African elephant population, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora placed an official ban on ivory trading all over the globe. In conclusion, slaves and ivory in the 1800s were two coveted commodities coming out of Africa. The effect such trade had on the international community continues to affect millions of lives all over the world and continues to ravage nations perpetually engulfed in civil strife.